In life, there are very few guarantees. However, there are two guarantees that I am 100% sure that you have experienced. At this moment, I am 100% sure that you have experienced the happiest moment in your life or the saddest moment of your life. I am also sure that at any point of your life, at the trigger of the memory, you can recall intricate details and often feel the feelings you had in that moment, no matter how far removed you are from the event. And this is just the amazing technology of our bodies. Fun fact, scientific research suggests that the body cannot tell the difference between a memory or a lived experience. So that good feel dopamine rush that you experienced, for example, when you got your first puppy, or someone you really cared about surprises you after not seeing them for a while. Even if the recall is not at the same level of the actual moment, those feel-good chemicals continue to be released every time you recall that memory. And on the other hand, if there's no healing or if there's no resolve, unfortunately, stress chemicals like cortisol can be released every time we recall that traumatic memory. This is why it's important to pay attention and be proactive in the stories we tell ourselves. This mind-body connection has been instrumental in the survival of our ancestors, and I personally believe it's the #1 reason why we're still here. Now, imagine our ancestors going without food for a couple days because the fish are just not biting. And in a moment of intuition and frustration, they decide to change their bait. And boom, the fish start to bite, and it's even more than they can imagine. I can only imagine the feelings of excitement and the adrenaline rush as they know that they will be able to eat and feed their families for a while. Now, how much you want to bet on the next grocery run, they most likely started with the bait that gave them the most success, right? Unfortunately, I do not have the infinite intelligence as to know why it is designed this way. But in life, we live by learned experiences. For example, there's a reason why we won't touch that hot stove again. And as we journey through life, internally, the body keeps a record of our experiences. It remembers the good ones and subsequently releases good hormones. It also remembers the not so good ones. And again, if we have not healed or found a resolution from the not so good experience, it, as in the experience, is then associated with the release of bad hormones and subsequently stored as trauma. Internally, our bodies is just doing its job. It's trying to survive. It records an experience so that in the future, it reminds you of what is safe or not. And even though most of us are not depending on this part of our biology to develop instincts for survival as our ancestors did, we can still use this part of our biology to help us make the right decisions, especially when it comes to our mental, emotional, and spiritual health. Now, in the physical, when we eat, the body gives us clues as to when it's satisfied or not. And as we go through life and interact with people and have various experiences, our body also records who and what may not be good for us. So at first emotion, we may be tempted to cut someone off immediately. And yes, there are times when this should be done. However, let's remember that internally, the body will remain biased and put its survival first. So when we cut someone off too soon, without resolution, we unfortunately store and carry the unresolved trauma for the rest of our lives. Alternatively, there's a method I've dubbed ICE when I find myself in these types of situations. Essentially, what this simple method does for me, it forces me in a direction closer to truth versus the narrative in my head. And according to the time you're listening to this recording, I understand that this acronym can be triggering. However, allow me the next moment to share a simple, fresh, and positive take on this here acronym. One that I believe can empower you in a positive and meaningful way within all of your relationships. A method that I use to this day as I empower myself through self-development and discovery. Number one, investigate. At first emotion, you may be riled up, you may be hurt, you may feel some type of way. But I would like to encourage you, outside of domestic violence and obvious manipulative tactics, interpret those feelings as a nudge to investigate. You see, we can be our worst enemies by interpreting and creating our own stories within our heads, unknowingly giving our bodies permission to store trauma, which is never good. Number two, if possible, get clarity. We are a diverse set of people on this earth with different beliefs, social etiquette, and backgrounds. So someone may unknowingly offend you due to cultural and background differences. Number three, execute. If you decide to move forward in that situation, create boundaries and create a code of conduct so that the actions doesn't repeat itself. In my experience, life repeats itself. And if you do not come up with boundaries or a resolution to that internal triggered response, another similar scenario will make an appearance. And that unresolved trigger will then give your body the permission to compound on that previous trauma, affecting your quality of life. We can't control ultimately what comes into our experience. However, with the right boundaries in place, we can skillfully manage what was once a negative trigger response into a lesson of growth and creating more opportunities of peace and happiness in our lives.